Welcome to the Qigong Global Summit, a free online event featuring some of the world's foremost Qigong teachers, sharing simple yet powerful practices to cultivate abundant Qi flow for succulent health, longevity, and inner harmony. Share this event with your friends and family, and come join us on Facebook at the Shift Network. And now your host, Sharon Smith.
So welcome, everyone. We are so glad that you're joining us today. And I'm very excited to introduce our special guest, Damo Mitchell. Damo is the director of the Lotus Neigong School of Taoist Arts and the founder of the Internal Arts Academy Online. He is a world-renowned teacher and author of many books on the Taoist arts. So Damo, it's such a great pleasure to have you joining us today. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very much for having me here. Yeah, thank you.
You have a very unique history in that you started studying the internal arts as a young child with your family and have dedicated your life to all of the Taoist classical arts, martial arts, medicine, as well as spiritual development. And I'm thinking that many people in our audience would like to know how you feel these studies connect and how your interest in these things grew from a young child to where you are today.
It's always a little bit disappointing when people ask me that because you would imagine there'd be some sort of great spiritual story as to why I was in the martial arts when I was younger. But actually, I just did what lots of people do. I just followed in my parents' footsteps, actually. So like some people's parents are doctors and their sons become doctors. And with me, I just grew up around martial arts classes. So I basically, they couldn't afford a babysitter. So I used to go along. And then I joined in, and I was too small to do anything because you can't really do anything when you're 4 or 5. You just sort of fling your arms around. But then gradually I just grew into it, and I think I didn't really like martial arts till I was about 14. I think it took about 10 years before I suddenly realized it was what I wanted to do, and then there was just a big switch, and I haven't done anything else since, really. But yeah, my earliest memories of it were quite sort of harrowing, really. I really didn't like them.
And so how did you transition from martial arts into being interested by spiritual development and Chinese medicine? How did that happen?
That was always my interest. Even when I was younger and I was studying martial arts and I was doing lots of combative things, I think that's why I had a problem. Was I always was really interested by the spiritual side of it and the stories of the past masters and Misty Mountains and so on and so on. But that wasn't what I encountered when I was in martial arts classes, you see. So then as I got older and then I started to encounter Qigong, that's what really grabbed me. That's what really pulled me in. My heart lays with Qigong more than it does with martial arts, even though I've done martial arts a lot longer.
Oh, wow. And so these fascinating stories that you were taken by, can you share one of those with us?
Oh, it was just all the stories of, wise sages that lived in mountains. I mean, Lao Tzu and Chuang-Tzu I was a fan of when I was younger. And Journey to the West, I really loved Magic Monkey at the time. It wasn't the most authentic version of it that was on TV, that sort of 70s show. But it was all those kind of things that I was drawn towards. And and as soon as I got old enough to travel, on my own, I just went to find people who could do those things, really. It became like an obsession more than anything else. I had to find people who could do those things.
And where did you travel initially?
Initially, I went to Thailand to start off with, which was like another planet coming from Europe into Bangkok the first time. I remember landing there. And then originally I went out there and I was only supposed to be there for 5 months, but I ended up the best part of the next decade. I think I was out there traveling around Southeast Asia and China, trying to find people. And I've been there ever since, really. This is the first year, because of lockdown, I've not been in Asia, I think. The first year in ages.
Yeah, traveling is not something anyone can do right now.
No.
So we have to do all this internal traveling. So
it's been very resting.
Yeah. So Qigong is starting now to be understood in Western society loosely as working with Qi. Yeah. In your presentation today, you're using the words Neigong
Yes.
instead of Qigong. Can you talk a little bit about what Qigong is, what Neigong is, how they are similar, how they are different, and what you plan to share with us?
Okay, yeah, sure. Every teacher, I guess, uses terminology slightly differently. And as you know, whenever you encounter a teacher, you have to get used to how they use the terminology. But for me, Qigong really refers to the exercises or the tools that you use to work with your inner system. Neigong is the process involved. So if somebody is training in Neigong, for me, they are using Qigong as tools to move through the process on the inside of the body. So that's how I use the terms. Neigong specifically is very, very heavily focused on yin and yang qi. That's kind of its focus for a really long time, maybe more so than Qigong exercises generally, I find. And a lot more focus in Neigong. Neigong teachers tend to emphasize very much this idea of yin and yang coming together inside the body. Whereas Qigong often is about circulation or nourishing organs and things like this.
Uh-huh. And, I've often heard the word nei translated as internal.
Sure, yes.
So, if Gong is the process of, or the skillful use of something, would you say that Neigong is generally more internal than Qigong?
I think that I don't want to appear. I think always what I try to avoid is people appear elitist about what they do, and I never want to come across that way. But I do think that Neigong takes things a little further than Qigong with regards to the internal body. Yes, yeah, I think it goes deeper than Qigong often does.
Uh-huh.
But you can see why I'm tiptoeing around that, because I never want to be elitist about what anyone's doing or anything.
So, what you're here to share with us is a practice around the Dantian. And a lot of Tai Chi and Qigong practitioners are familiar with that term, but many people who are new to these practices have never heard it or find it mysterious. Can you talk a little bit about the Dantian and what it means and what that term comes from and why it's important and all those juicy things?
Sure, I can try. The Dantian is, I think I encountered the term Dantian when I was a teenager, but I don't think I really understood it for at least another decade, probably, of training, even though the term kept coming up. And I think it was always difficult to ascertain exactly what they meant by it, because a lot of people, when they say Dantian, just generally refer to a region of the body or some kind of area where qi can be stored. But the Dantian in alchemical arts is specifically the place, like the refined area where all of the different energies you can find within the body are taken and then refined or condensed, depending on what tradition you do. So the Dan obviously refers to the elixir, like the highest of the internal medicines that can be produced according to Taoist mythology. And that's the place it goes to. But the Dantian becomes the focus for a lot of what I teach people in the beginning, because where perhaps I differ from some other people is that I don't see the Dantian as just a region. It is something that needs to be formed. And when people first come, they don't actually have a Dantian as such. They have that region of the body. But what needs to happen is they need to build a field out of yin qi inside that area. And then the yang qi is placed into that container. And that's what I try to show people when they come along. And that's the practice I've tried to share with people, to show how to lead that energy to the right place using the breath.
And what is the difference between the yin and the yang qi?
There was another thing that was a lot of years to figure that out too. As you know, that the terms are often quite vague, but essentially yin is form. So most people who study Chinese medicine or saying, learn that yin is form and yang is more ethereal, energetic, when the two are compared to each other. So in the body, the yin aspect of the Dantian is that thing that forms a field. So essentially it feels like, it's not quite the same as, but it feels like a form of magnetism within the lower abdomen. So anything that pulls or stretches or moves or forms a sphere is to do with yin. And then the yang qi is that substance that's placed into the Dantian. And that's essentially a form of a kind of bioelectricity. It moves through the nerves, it moves in linear patterns through the body. So a lot of Neigong is about essentially trying to get the yang qi to move into the yin field and then get the two to combine. And this is where they talk about yin and yang coming together to get them to squeeze, essentially. So there's a long process in Neigong in getting that yang qi into the container of the yin field. And when the two come together, that's the Dantian. Well, that's the Qigong version of the Dantian.
And why would someone want to do that? Why is it important?
Well, first of all, the efficiency of your body's functioning. I mean, to me, with regards to, lots of people talk about the health of Qigong. You know, this Qigong is good for health because it does this, it does that. The basis of it to me is how efficiently is your body functioning? And largely, the energy reserves that control that efficiency are to do with how much qi is stored within the Dantian. So within Neigong traditions, they even have, it was really interesting when I first encountered them, was they're very, very black and white. It's amazing how they structure everything. There's no room for anything vague. And they even talk about percentages. And they say that the average human being has about 10% qi in the Dantian, like naturally, that's kind of your capacity. And at about 15% qi in the Dantian, then it starts to form. And so this is what we're trying to do at the beginning. And then everything past this percentage is really then improving the health of the body's functioning, which then spills out into the channels and opens up all of the other processes that you read about within alchemy or anything like this. At the higher ends of it, really that energy is then used for spiritual cultivation. But for most people, I think at the beginning, health and efficiency of the body is probably the most important.
So we have this yin qi and we have this yang qi within our bodies. Are we able to grow that, or is that limited, or is that something that we can grow?
That's a big question. The yin qi is an interesting one because basically when you were a child, according to Neigong theory, you had a really strong yin field, you know, like when you were a toddler wandering around like they do. And then gradually as you age, that field disperses. So it's kind of like the yin field spreads. Mm-hmm. So initially what you have, that yin field needs to condense. And this is why a lot of the Qigong has Gong in the hands, pushing down and pressing and gathering everything. And I made the mistake of when I started, like many people do, of thinking you're pulling like energy into that area, but you're not really, you're gathering that field. And when the field is gathered, then your yin qi field is there. Then to build yang qi is more complicated. That is more complex. There is a whole process of breathing exercises, dietary requirements, herbs that can assist you as well, and things like that to build this energy in the body. But it's like anything. Once the ball is rolling, it's not so bad. It's often the initial process, like the first step that's the most tricky. After that, it's not too bad.
Would you say that cultivating your Dantian is one of the most important things you could do as a practitioner of Qigong?
I think that, yes. Yeah, I was trying to think if there was an exception, but yeah, I think so. I think for most people, what they want, the health, a centered mind. I mean, the bigger the Dantian, it's more like an anchor for the mind dropping down inside the body. And I would say it's the basis for most work people should do, yeah, for a fair while. Almost every Neigong teacher I encountered were heavily, in Asia, were heavily focused on the lower Dantian for a very, very long time. Almost to the point of driving you insane sometimes with how long they want you to build it.
And, you know, when people talk about qi or think about qi, it can be a very mysterious, elusive quality. What does it feel like to, I mean, do you feel something in your Dantian when you're cultivating? What are like guideposts on the way of cultivating your Dantian?
Knowing how full it is actually pretty tricky. The actual percentage is quite hard. And normally what happens within the Neigong traditions is you have to have a teacher tell you how full it is. But you do know when it's building. So the first thing is generally when a lot of energy moves into the area, the abdomen gets very, very hot. That's the most common one people will experience. which to me is much like if you take a cheap electrical device and put too much electricity through it, the resistance produces a sort of burn off of heat, and that tends to come into the abdomen. And then gradually, as you get used to processing that energy, that heat will subside. So that's the first one. Then after this, when the field builds, there's this weird phenomenon inside the body that it grips you. So the magnetic field actually grips the abdomen. So it almost feels like you have a, what do you call that? Like a TENS machine, but plugged on the inside of your abdomen. So it's almost like you're doing internal sit-ups on the inside. It's very peculiar as it builds. And then after this, it starts to, that's the yin field. And then when it builds further, you tend to feel the yang qi, which feels more like an electrical current moving around inside the abdominal cavity. It's not always very pleasant at first. You get used to it.
And do you feel this all the time or just when you're practicing?
In the early stages, it's very strong when you're practicing. But then after a while, yeah, it's pretty much constantly there. It's one of those things. It's like you normalize it, like you normalize an experience. And I tell you when you notice it is when it's not there. That's when you notice it. So if you're ever incredibly tired, for me, that's jet lag. If I've been flying country to country and then I'm just exhausted. Or if you get sick or something like this, then you just notice that it's gone. And then, do you know what I mean? You notice the opposite.
Right.
When you actually notice the presence of it.
And I know that you're going to share a 20-minute practice with us after we're finished with our conversation, but can you tell us some specific methods for developing the Dantian?
Yeah, a lot of it's already contained within Qigong teachings, but sometimes I think people don't know which are the principles to focus on. So one of the key ones, for example, is most people know that when you stand in Qigong, you bend your knees. And they say to help you relax your legs and da-da-da. But it's more than that. For me, what happens when you bend the knees is the center of gravity is lowered very much. And there's a very specific point inside the abdomen that the center of gravity has to touch. And when the two touch together in Qigong, then that starts the yin field sort of converging. But a lot of people will miss that point because they'll be too high or they'll be too low. And then after this, to get it to build, a lot of it is to do with use of the breath and use of the hands. So there's very specific postures and very specific breathing patterns that draw the qi in. And that's what I showed in the exercise, especially the breathing part, to show how to draw that energy into the Dantian.
And are there any, do you have any cautions that you want to share with people? I know that sometimes when people start working with qi, they have all kinds of internal experiences. Some of them are very disturbing. Some of them are liberating. People become healthy all of a sudden. Other people have dreams, emotional discharge, various things. Is there anything that you can share with us about how this works in practical life?
Yeah. I mean, first safety thing I would say is that with regards to Dantian work, women should never practice Dantian work if they're pregnant. That's the first thing, especially this kind of strong work. Just because there's so many energetic processes going on anyway during that time, I don't think we want to add to it. So that's the first one. I don't think anyone under the age of 18 should really practice Dantian work, because kids tend to be too good at it is the problem. So it tends to form too quickly, much too fast, and sometimes it can be a bit overloading for them. So I think they should avoid that straight away. But then with regards to safety, I'm an acupuncturist as well, and I kind of a bit of a specialist in treating people who have Qigong deviations. So I spend a lot of time working with people. That's pretty much all I treat these days, actually, is Qigong deviations from, not created by me, thankfully, but people coming in who've had problems in meditation and things like that. And almost always, it's because they've sent too much energy into the nervous system and the spine. That's the vast majority of what people have done. So they've put themselves into fight or flight way too quickly. And a lot of the reasons, especially is when they start using breathing, is they're starting to pull the energy back. So it tends to touch the spinal nerves and shoot up into the brain rather than drawing it to the Dantian cavity. The big culprit here is reverse abdominal breathing. And this is where people get problems. And this is why I've tried to show how to do this so that the energy goes to the Dantian and not the nervous system in the practice. And it's about pulling the energy in rather than back.
Got it. And you're sharing that in the practice that we're going to see shortly.
Yes.
Awesome. So given what we've talked about, what is the one thing that you'd like to leave us with today, or the next step that our listeners can take to improve their lives with a practice like this?
Well, for fear of sounding like a stuck record, I think that really the building of the Dantian does a great deal for lots of people. I think that if people can understand within each Qigong system, there's always a way to build the Dantian. It's always there. Sometimes it's very explicit. Sometimes it's kind of hinted at. But if people can really sort of look past all of the exercises in their system and really find where is that core teaching that helps them build the Dantian, that's really the basis of everything that people want from Qigong, the health, the mental development, spiritual development. It's the basis for all of it, I think.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Damo, for sharing your wisdom with us, and thanks to all of you for joining us. Stay tuned now for Damo Mitchell's practice on developing the Dantian for Neigong.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's long been understood that the basis for arts like Qigong and alchemy, Neigong, essentially the foundation is based around the idea of building the energy within the lower Dantian region. Most people understand that the qi circulates through the body, but there is a large storehouse of energy that can be built in the lower abdominal cavity. Essentially, at the beginning, we can think of this as like a rechargeable battery, that when we start practicing, it's pretty low. It's been off of charge for a fair while, and we need to build it up inside this area of the abdomen. We need to recharge the batteries. The more the battery is charged, the more it provides vitality for the body, vitality for the whole system, and essentially means your body functions at a more efficient level. There are many benefits to this, health and mental clarity and all sorts of other beneficial attributes we can get from filling up the Dantian. But then also for people interested in alchemy or Neigong, the basis of many of the cultivational aspect of the arts are also rooted here. Because essentially the rule in Taoism is whatever change you want to make, whatever step you want to make along your path, you're going to need a little bit of juice to do it, a little bit of fuel. And the Dantian is where this is stored. Now, in order to get the qi to the Dantian, that's a little bit of a complex process. It's not so easy as just using our arms to pull it in or something. It doesn't really work like that. We need to have an efficient tool to guide the qi to the Dantian towards the battery to charge it up. And in the majority of cases, this tool is the breath. Breath work itself is not studied within Qigong or within alchemy purely in order for you to understand the breath, not really. The breath is used as a gateway to understand the qi, to understand the energy. It is understood that if you can use the breath in the most effective manner, then the qi will do what it's supposed to do. You can think of the breath as being like the commander that gives instructions to the qi. So when we talk about breath work, what we really mean is setting up the correct qualities within ourselves so that the qi goes where we want it to go. And in this case, it's the Dantian. So what I want to show you is a simple enough breathing method that will draw the qi to the Dantian. You could call this Dantian breathing if you like. Some people will know it as a form of reverse breathing. But it doesn't really matter what you want to call it. It's a breathing method that brings qi to this area of the body. To draw qi to the Dantian, we don't use our imagination or visualization in any way. Instead, we use the body's natural processes which we guide with the breath. If you can master the breathing technique, the Dantian will start to receive the qi. This is the basis for Qigong and also for many Neigong methods, if you know what these are. So, first of all, you wish to be sat with your spine upright. I'm sat on the floor in a comfortable position, but if you find the floor difficult, you find you end up sort of sat hunched up because your hips are tight or something like that, don't worry, you can sit in a chair. But if you sit in a chair, just don't use the back of the chair. Sit forward from it so you're not leaning back into it. Just make sure your spine is vertical and just make sure you're comfortable. It's better to be comfortable than on the floor, all sort of crunched up, yeah? So then when you're sat, elevate the spine, and just take a few breaths in and out through the nose first. Always when we start any exercise like this, we just do nothing first. We just breathe, or rather we allow the body to breathe in and out through the nose. We take a little bit of time to settle into what we're doing. This little bit of time, this short time just to settle in, is almost like creating a gap between what you were doing before your practice and your practice. It's like a little sort of full stop from what was going on before you started doing this. So we just sit and we breathe. The analogy they sometimes use is like muddy water settling, like sediment in water, moving to the bottom of the glass. So I just breathe and let everything settle. Don't let the spine collapse. Keep the head up. Simply allow the body to breathe first. Do not try to force anything, or don't try to breathe to any particular area of the body. Just pay attention. As you give your gentle attention to your breathing, it will start to improve naturally anyway. If you try to intend a change, it will often create a kind of stagnation, because the breathing does not really like to be instructed too much. If we give attention instead of intention, then that attention will mean that gradually you will start to relax and the breath will sink down. Let the point of focus of your breathing gradually sink through the body. The more you relax, the more you allow the muddy water to settle, the more your breathing will move down towards the abdominal cavity. We call this anchoring the breath in the abdomen. Simply give attention to the breath till it starts to sink. Just a few more breaths, like this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start to look at where our breathing moves to. So take your hand and place your finger in your navel, your umbilicus. And then what you're going to do is you're going to find a few points. The first is your umbilicus, belly button. 2 fingers thickness underneath the navel. So I come down 2 fingers thickness with. This gives me a point called Qi Hai. This is Ren 6. And then 2 fingers down further again gives me Guan Yuan, another point, Ren 4. So we have 3 points. The belly button, Qi Hai, Guan Yuan. Belly button, Qi Hai, Guan Yuan. Now when you breathe, people will be in one of 3 categories. They'll either breathe and the emphasis for the expansion of their abdomen will be in the belly button, or it'll be in Ren 6, or it'll be in Ren 4, Guan Yuan. So Qi Hai or Guan Yuan. So first of all, I put my hand here, and I just breathe, letting my abdomen just expand gently on the inhalation, as it should naturally do if the breath is anchored low. And I ascertain which of those 3 points is the peak of my inhalation. So when I breathe in, which one of those 3 points expands the more? If it is the umbilicus, or it is Guan Yuan, it is not quite right. It means your breathing is creating a little bit of stagnation in your body, which means it will lock your diaphragm. I need to breathe to Qi Hai, to Ren 6, so the one that is 2 fingers underneath your belly button. So normally I'm not a fan of adjusting the breath, but in this case, if you are breathing into the umbilicus or into Guan Yuan, just give a very, very gentle suggestion of an instruction to your breath. Very, very gentle. And just let it change until Qi Hai is where your body is breathing. So now when I allow my body to breathe, when you breathe in, Qi Hai is expanding. When I breathe out, Qi Hai is relaxing. Qi Hai means the sea of Qi. It's another name for the Dantian. So this point is related to the Dantian. So first of all, again, just take a few breaths. Make sure you're breathing to the correct place. Okay. Just continue like so for a few breaths in and out. Doesn't matter how long they are. Just let the body breathe. Okay, so now our breath is low, and we are sure we are breathing to REN 6. Now what we're going to do is we're going to change the breathing, so we have an active breath, to start to guide the Qi towards the Dantian. So the way we do this is, first of all, with an action. As when I breathe in, REN 6 is going to draw back towards the spine a little. So I breathe in through the nose, and I draw REN 6 back. I breathe out through the nose, and I relax, allow the abdomen just to expand, yeah? So some people will know this as reverse breathing. So I breathe in, draw the REN 6 back, breathe out, and relax. So now my abdomen expands. So when I breathe in, REN 6 comes back, breathe out, REN 6 expands. So I have this little movement, breathing in, breathing out. Breathe in, breathe out. So first we get used to this idea that I breathe in, REN 6 back, breathe out, REN 6, and the abdomen expands, okay? So breathing in with contraction, breathe out, relax. So this first part, just continue it, just ensures that you understand which way the abdominal wall opens and closes. But now, to draw the Qi to the Dantian, there is a trick. There's a little quality, a little knack that we add that sometimes people miss. Yeah. If you simply reverse breathe like this by pulling the abdominal wall in, the Qi will not go to the Dantian. In actual fact, after a while, what it does is the Qi goes back towards the spine and starts to rise up the back, which won't send it to the Dantian. It's not what we want right now. To get it to the Dantian, we have a little trick, like I say, and this is what we do. We put the mind on the inside of the abdominal cavity, and instead of closing the abdominal wall from the outside, I draw the abdominal wall closed from the inside. It sounds like it will do the same thing, but it's not. A very different series of connections will be used. So to do this, what I do is I bring the mind down into the abdominal cavity. It doesn't have to be dead on the Dantian, but inside the abdominal cavity. And as I breathe in, you're going to close the abdominal cavity ever so slightly on the inside. It's like you were just drawing on the inside. Then when you breathe out, just relax. Let the abdominal cavity expand. So when I breathe in through the nose, mind inside. Draw the abdominal cavity closed, just a little. Then breathe out. Then just relax. So breathe in, draw the abdominal cavity closed. Then breathe out and relax. So instead of the abdominal wall, the abdominal muscles contracting like they will if I pull them in, instead it's like there's something on the inside, the sphere, that abdominal cavity just gets a little smaller, and the byproduct of this is that it will pull the abdominal wall in. You'll notice that if you're breathing correctly from inside, your body won't move very much. So if I close my reverse abdominal breathing by using the abdominal wall, it's like I'm sucking my guts in, you'll see a big movement. But if I'm doing it correctly and I close the cavity inside, there's hardly any movement on the outside. It's not very much at all. It's almost invisible. It's very, very small. If I breathe like this, instead of sending the chi to the spine, it will draw it in towards the Dantian. Okay? So again, first of all, I anchor the breath down. Then I bring the mind into the abdominal cavity. Everything from the diaphragm and under. And as I breathe in, just gently let that space get a little smaller. Then when you breathe out, just relax and let it reset. I breathe in. Close that space. Breathe out. Just let it relax. If I then check my body, put my fingers here when I breathe in, there's hardly any movement on my abdominal wall. I breathe out, hardly any movement, because it's all done in the abdominal cavity. Breathe in, let it close. Breathe out, let it expand. Breathe in, the abdominal cavity closes. Breathe out, let it expand. If I draw the abdominal wall closed, do it wrong. If I'm pulling from the outside, it will lift the diaphragm, it will push the breath high into your chest. You'll end up breathing up here. It will also stimulate the nerves, the nervous system. You'll start to feel quite agitated after a while, just because you're sending the energy to the wrong place. You're sending it to the spine, sending it to the nerves, sending it past the kidneys and the adrenals. If, however, I do this correctly and I sink the mind down to the abdomen and I close that space on the inhalation, and I relax that space open on the exhalation, this space, the closing of the abdominal wall, means the diaphragm can still move in a relaxed fashion. The breath will stay down, and the chi will be guided towards the Dantian. Instead of being stimulated, quite the opposite. You don't get agitated. You'll start to get very, very calm. Everything will feel like it's anchored, very, very centered down here. You won't get agitated, you won't get emotional. Everything will feel very strong in this area. This will start to fill the battery of the Dantian. So again, our spine is upright. I lightly close the eyes. I sink the breath inside to the abdominal cavity. Sink the mind down there. Let the muddy water settle. Then when I breathe in through the nose, gently close that space inside the abdomen, as if you're drawing everything towards the Dantian. Then breathe out. And just relax. Let the abdominal space open of its own accord. Then again, breathe in. Out. You'll find that at first, it'll be an act of doing, and then we have to teach the muscles to move in the right way from the inside. It's almost like you're drawing the air out of the sac of the abdomen, so it closes a bit. After a while, though, it will not be a case of doing, it will just be automatic. You sink your mind down inside. This will be the natural way that your body breathes. This will become probably the strongest form of recharging that you have available to you. The strongest method to bring the chi to the Dantian that is based upon breathing. Sometimes people think that they are energizing the body when actually they're agitating. It's not quite the same. Yeah, sometimes it's just like an empty form of energy you're running on. Essentially, it's a form of stress. Filling the Dantian through this kind of breathing method is a little different. There is a vitality that is not based in stress. It is simply based upon reserves and an air of being anchored to the correct place. If you adopt this breathing practice, take some time, get it right, nothing wrong with spending a bit of time refining it. And you do this for 15 minutes every day, maybe in the morning when you wake up, or some other point during the day, but I wouldn't recommend right before you go to sleep, because you might find that it might be difficult to doze off afterwards. Leave a couple of hours before you sleep out. If you do this for 15 minutes every day, the Dantian will gradually fill, the battery will recharge, and you'll start to develop more of the fuel that you require for whatever else you do, for your other Qigong systems, for your meditation practice, or just generally for your health, your well-being, resilience, quality of life. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us for the Qigong Global Summit, brought to you by the Shift Network. To learn more, visit QigongGlobalSummit.com. To join our global community of people awakening to their divine humanity and taking inspired action, visit theshiftnetwork.com. Thank you again for gathering with us and for sharing this healing path with your friends and family.